And we're back with another episode of the Rob J Show, another Black Tech edition. I'm here with a very special guest, Bria Sullivan. She is a software engineer at Google, very accomplished, not only in her own career, but also now with the Techstackd and other organizations, opening doors for other people to launch careers in tech. She's the first person I've ever spoken with who has a permanent installation in the Smithsonian. And I look forward to learning more about you, and a pleasure to have you today on the podcast. Welcome to the Rob J Show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for responding. You know, I reached out to you, slid in the DMs, and was like, when I saw your profile, and was just really, just honest with you. Like, hey, you know, I had this podcast, been interviewing a lot of people, but one area that I really wanted to focus on was including, you know, the stories of, you know, more sisters. And I didn't want to go about just finding people and saying, hey, we just need women. Like, let's just find. I wanted to find people who had stories that I was truly intrigued with. And like your story is, I mean, from everything that I've seen and what you were just describing was pretty amazing. How did you get started? I mean, where did your interest in technology begin?
So it's hard to say like interest in technology because I grew up, you know, using the computer like a lot of people, a lot of millennials. But the reason why I started to get into computer science was completely by accident. I was applying to colleges right around the time in like 2008 when the recession was like the heart of the recession. And a lot of my friends' parents were like losing their homes and stuff. And like I was in high school and applying for colleges. And I was really good at calculus and physics, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I want to make sure I have a job when I get out. So I just looked up, you know, like the top paying jobs outside of college, and they were all engineering jobs. The first one that I saw was nuclear engineering, and I didn't really have an interest in that. And then I just scrolled down the list and saw computer science, computer engineering. So I just chose it at random and got into like one of the best undergraduate engineering schools in California. And I still didn't know what it was until I started. And then my first class was about mobile apps, and I was like, oh, making apps for phones. That's what I signed up for. That's awesome. So that's how I like got into it. And then when I actually fell in love with it, once I started to realize that I can use technology and use computer science to be a canvas for my creativity. I could make whatever I wanted that came into my mind. So that's why I fell in love with it. And then I started making mobile apps my freshman year of college.
Wow. That is dope. Wow. I mean, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I say
it was all happenstance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, you had that, you know, hey, you know, I'm good at calculus, and rocket science isn't quite me, so I guess I'll just go be an engineer somewhere. Like that's you know, but no, but it sounds like, you know, one of the things that drew me to it in my own way that is similar, I guess, at the end of the road is the fact that you could build anything. You know, that's one thing that I really like about tech as well. And you know, I'm really glad to be speaking with you and learning about, you know, your route, because it really sounds like, you know, the route that a lot of times us as a people haven't gotten, which has been like really going to the best engineering school and really killing it in that way, and not kind of having to kind of hack some skills together. Like what school did you go to, if you don't mind me asking?
Cal Poly.
Okay.
Cal Poly. It's I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's in the middle of California on the coast.
Okay. And while you were there and you're studying your engineering, and your freshman year you started making apps, what's the first apps you made? Like what'd you put out there?
Okay, so this was about 2010, 2011. There wasn't really like a huge iPhone versus Android war. It wasn't as hard, like thick then, because people still had like other types of phones. So I first just went to Android because it was written in a language that I was already learning.
Okay.
So my first app was horrible. It was called, the abbreviation for it was actually Booby. But it was just like buying habits. It had to do with buying habits, and it just did not do well at all. But it basically just multiplied. It was the first app that I made, but I learned a lot about product by doing an app that did horrible. So I like bounced back pretty quickly after that. And within a few months, I made my next app, which was called Sexy Zodiac Matchmaker. And that one did pretty well. I didn't update it very often, but within the first month, I had 10,000 users. Within the first year, I had over 100,000 users. So the app was basically you put in your sign and your gender, and then your partner's sign and your partner's gender, and then it just came up with a bunch of like relationship and sex compatibility based on your zodiac signs.
Wow.
And people loved it. Yeah, people loved it. I ended up rebranding it as Sutrology in 2017, and I relaunched it for iOS and Android.
Okay, so if I want to download it, you said it's called Stutrology?
Sutrology. It's like sutra, like Kama Sutra plus
Oh,
astrology. Sutrology.
you
Yeah.
slick. Look at, okay, Miss Janet, if you're nasty. I see you. Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm downloading that tonight. Yeah, I need to see. Now, does it tell you, do I already have to have the partner in place, or will it give me some suggestions?
No. Like you can just you can choose what someone that you have been with in the past, someone you want to be with. You honestly, you just choose a sign and a gender, and then it just shows different compatibility and your love horoscope, stuff like that.
Oh, okay. No, that's dope. That is awesome. So I'm gonna download, check out Sutrology. So you did the rebrand, and then once you did that, have you noticed any difference in your approach to it? I guess platform wise on iOS versus your experience when you're on Android, or is it you just put it out?
Yeah. So more women have iPhones. At least more women in the U.S. have iPhones. So that's why I started to focus more on because the majority of my audience were women. And like what was very interesting to me, though, when I first created the app when I was in college, is that the majority of my users were Black.
Okay.
And I just thought that was interesting because, like, I made it just as a college student who's super into zodiac signs, but turns out it's something that a lot of older Black women were really into. So that drove some of these features. I haven't worked on it in a while, mostly because I didn't really want to spend all my energy on something that I didn't care that much about. I kind of outgrew the passion for zodiac and for astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, yeah, I can make a lot of money if I do this, but do I want to? Do I want to invest? Like, do I want this to be what I'm known for? And when I had that conversation with myself, the answer was no. But I did learn a lot about customer acquisition, and then also because people are trying to make apps now, and the approach that I did a long time ago was completely different. I learned that before in 2011, 2012, that time was a time where people were still getting their first iPhone or their first Android, basically their first smartphone. So they were going to the App Store and looking for apps to download them. So it was much easier to acquire users during that time. Now, if you were to release an app, the chances, people's behaviors completely change with their phone. For the most part, people don't really go to the App Store to browse unless they're looking for a mobile game or something very, very specific. But and I think people who want to create apps don't realize that, and they think that they can just put something out there and people will download it. But that's no longer the case now, because when I first created Sutrology, when it was Sexy Zodiac Matchmaker, I didn't do a single thing to market it. And it ended up on the top 100 of its category within a month.
Wow.
I didn't do a single thing.
Wow.
But now I actually had to run Google ads. I had to create an Instagram for it. I had to run a bunch of contests and stuff like that. So it's helped me help others. So that's what I'm really thankful for.
Okay.
With creating it, yeah.
And that's amazing just to hear like that first experience, because that was going to be my question out the gate when you said, 10,000 users first month, 100,000 first year. I'm in my head, I'm like, okay, tell me the brilliant marketing campaign that went along with this.
There was nothing.
Wow. Okay. And that's amazing though. The amount, like you said, the habits. I never really thought about, how my habits have changed in relation to my smartphone. I guess now I would say, yeah, I don't remember when I switched from like a BlackBerry, but I would just say this probably is my third iPhone. And yeah, now that you say that, yeah, I do treat the App Store a lot different. The App Store is almost like music now, where it's like, if I don't hear about it from somebody, I don't necessarily just check it out,
Yeah. And that's it taught me how to be a good product manager, and because eventually I would like to get back into building products. And you have to pay attention not only to like the behaviors of the people with your app, but also just the behaviors of people with their devices in general. So that's just how I justify some people, when they do create something, then I'm like, okay, well, if you don't have the money, maybe you want, and you do speak another language, you can choose another country to target, and that country will probably have a lot more first-time adopters. So that's also a different strategy.
Wow.
But yeah, you just said that you haven't looked at the App Store. Like, what do you? I actually want to know. Like, do you go to your App Store just to browse, just cause?
No, I don't go there just to browse. Just because, I mean, if I go to the App Store, I downloaded an app today. I paid 99 cents for it, but it was because it was made by somebody who I knew personally. Actually, a guy named Marlon Avery. He made an app. He made an app for the IG comedian Ha Davis.
Oh no.
Well, he's like
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, hey, some people don't know who he is. But he's a Instagram personality, so to speak, and he has a couple slogans like "This is beyond me." He's a comedian. So anyway, his app that he made was stickers based on these characters that he does on IG. But the only reason I downloaded it, I mean, I enjoy having it. I sent a couple text messages today using the emojis, but again, it was because somebody specifically told me. The last app that I downloaded on my own, I don't like it, but it's a dating app called Hinge or something. But again, one of my guys hit me up and he was like, "Yo, you got to try this thing, Hinge." But he's in a whole nother city. He's in LA. I'm like, your Hinge might be different from ours. We're late adopters out here.
Yeah, I have never heard of Hinge until I started listening to Nicole Byer, her podcast, and she started talking about Hinge. But she's in LA, and everyone who talks about it is in LA. So I'm sure it's like a very LA thing.
Yeah, and it's I'm a simple man. Let me swipe left or right and keep going about my business. I don't want to have to like this, but then send a comment with that like and all it is. But I do see how maybe it's like the next iteration of a dating app.
Yeah.
But
you heard that word of mouth. See, you didn't just like go and be like, oh, let's look for dating apps, or let's just browse through the store and have a different experience. Let this take me on a journey. It's not the way that it used to be, where it's like, okay, I just got my first phone. I want to fill it with apps, because it was like the slogan at the time that was really, really popular, if you remember this, was "There's an app for that." Do you
I
remember
do
that?
remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So like people were trying to find an app for everything. So, but now people are really, or a lot more strategic. They want apps that aren't going to take too much data on their phone, that doesn't use their location when they're not using it. Like they want to maximize their battery life. So people are a lot more cutthroat with what they keep on their phone now.
Yeah, wow. I never thought about it like that, but yeah, you are right because I really can't. I'm still here in my head, like trying to go back through, and I can't think of an app that I've downloaded just, I guess, organically, just in the app store. This seems cool. I can't remember one.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, yeah, I appreciate that. That really opened my eyes to something. And I am a newbie as far as trying to get my first app in the app store. I'm on Udemy taking a course, and
Mm-hmm.
basically just right now we're on the simple stuff, the Hello World, real basic stuff. But in thinking about ideas, I never really thought about what you just, kind of what you just basically alerted me
Mm-hmm.
to is just really thinking about people's habits. I've never even
Yeah.
factored that in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so no, that's what's up. So it sounds like you really like your coming of age was like at the almost the apex of this new transition into this mobile first life, and
Mm-hmm.
your approach being just let me just put something out there and build. Like, did you have any I guess like trepidation towards like learning the languages, learning a new programming language, or did you just say, hey, this is how it's built, this is what I need to know? Was it part of your curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get up and running as a
Uh,
coder?
So I didn't learn anything from the first class because it was more just like an intro to what you can do with programming to make sure that people didn't drop off. Because a lot of people when they take their first coding class, they're just like, "What is the point of this?" And then they leave. Especially at the time, women were doing that a lot at the school that I was at. So that's why they created that program. And it was still a time. So again, this is when, smartphones were starting to pick up more and when people were being first time adopters. And I just had this like real feeling because of the convenience of mobile devices. I was like, mobile is going to be the future. Everything's going to be mobile. I have to make sure that I'm part of that. So after my first quarter at Cal Poly, between fall, like on my winter break between fall and spring, I sat at home and taught myself Android. It was during when Borders was also closing, so they had all of these books on sale, and so I was like, dope! I can just go to Borders and get all these books for Android. So I got a couple books, taught myself, and then that's how I created the first app that didn't do well. And then that's how I started to realize I had to learn things and be a little bit more strategic. So I did Android development up until 2012, and then I took a class for iOS at my school because most of my ideas were geared towards women, and I knew that I needed to learn iOS. So I got an iPhone and then started to learn iOS development. And then I just started creating apps from there. I got a job. While I was in school at like a dev shop in town and just created apps all the time. So I was like just exercising my design skills, exercising my iOS skills, Android skills. But one thing that going to school helps is the ramp up time. They teach you all of the base knowledge, so that like learning a new language is pretty easy. When I was I think it was either my sophomore or junior year, it was during when Windows Phone was also a contender, and they had a hackathon, and I taught myself how to do Windows Phone development the night before and ended up winning the hackathon the next day, mostly because I was the only girl and I wanted to add something to prove, and I was the only Black person in it. So I wanted to like destroy everybody that was like in my in my head.
Wow.
But like It's mostly what I like about learning the different native languages is that I get a really in-depth learning of how the systems work and why it is that way. I'm not sure if you're aware of React Native, but React Native. I'm sorry. Am I getting too technical for like your audience?
No,
I'm
no,
sorry. I'm getting a
no.
little too technical.
I'm selfish. The podcast is for me. So, like, no, get as technical as you
Okay.
want. I'm enjoying everything you're talking about. No, that's
Okay.
keep it going with React.
Okay. Yeah, so React is one of the hottest, languages. There's been one for all. So one for all frameworks are the ones where you like write one code base and you can deploy it to Android and iOS. To people who are a little bit newer to this space, they think, "Oh, great, this is awesome! Like I can do whatever I want." Blah blah blah. There are certain cases where React Native makes sense. There are other cases where it doesn't make sense and people don't know that going into it. So they learn this thing and try to build this thing and then they run into this issue like, oh, well, I don't know what to do from here. So that's why I like having knowing how to do iOS natively and Android natively so that I know early what the capabilities are and if I should go about it native or if I should go about it in React Native, which is in JavaScript, and then it's a one for all framework. I have a class for this, by the way.
Okay, now we're gonna be sure to let people know about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Your class,
Okay.
your basically just all the amazing stuff you're doing. So when you let's backtrack real quick to this hackathon.
Okay.
How do you learn a language in one night? Like, what does that look? What does that night look like? What are you like? Are you just have a 12-pack of Red Bulls next to you? Like, how do you learn a language in one night and then go compete 24 hours later? Like, this is like the question of the night.
So Windows Phone was written in C#, which is what all Windows applications are also written in. And it's very similar to Java. So I already have a pretty good background in Java and I had a good background in Android. So I just had to map things, one to one. I just needed to make sure I could get through from idea to execute. So I already had an idea. I looked through through the Android App Store and I'm like, okay, what would be something that's compelling enough that I could finish in 24 hours and or 12 hours. Yeah, it wasn't 24, it was 12. And I was like, okay, well, I did a dream dictionary where it also analyzed the dream and then told you what the dream meant. So, or not a dream dictionary, a dream log. So like a dream diary. And so I was like, okay, well, these are the screens. I just drew out the screens that I'll probably need. And then just looked up a couple tutorials on what I would need and then tried a few things. And then I was like, okay, I'm good. And then I just learned while I was going the next day.
Yeah. You operating at like genius level. I mean, do you feel like, are you playing fair or are you using some type of gift, from the Most High that you were given that maybe some of us other mere mortals don't have? Because normally I hear people share their story and I hear like, oh, I'm just not inspired enough. But like, I don't know if there's some inspiration that could make me do that in 24 hours.
I am. I don't know if it's. I love learning. I really, really love learning. So maybe I'm a quick learner. I think maybe that's what it is. And I'm pretty intentional with my learning, where I just need to learn just enough to execute what my goals are. That's something that I had to learn. So not to try and learn everything so that eventually I can do it. I had a goal first and then learned enough to accomplish the goal.
Now that's one thing I will say I have learned. Like, I'm a web developer at a university, and with WordPress, in the beginning, I wanted to be Superman and know everything about everything, but basically WordPress is WordPress, Codex, PHP, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript, some SQL. That's it, and
Mm-hmm.
really, and even the PHP is really just a couple things that it uses inside of PHP. So I had to learn for my own ego, just so it's like, hey, instead of trying to be, Superman, why don't I focus on the things that I actually use? I have seen a big difference in that. To your point, having that intention behind learning, because I'm not I like tech and I like programming languages, but I don't like them enough just to study them as a liberal art, so to speak, without having
Mm-hmm.
something real that is being applied to.
Yeah.
So,
I think I would have experienced the exact same thing if I didn't have a goal in mind. I had a friend, we're no longer friends, but when I was in college, I had a friend that like would always come up with ideas, and like I was like and would almost sell me on these dreams of making a lot of money, and then I would just execute them. And I was like, okay, well, we had an agreement that we were both going to we were like going to use our schooling to learn the skills that we needed to execute these things. I did that. The other person did not. So that's part of why we're no longer friends. But yeah.
wow.
That I always had a vision in like, I'm going to do a startup once I'm done. Like I have all these ideas. I have all these things that I want to do. Like I had a goal, but before I had that goal, I definitely was just like just getting through life.
Okay.
Like day by day.
No, I see what you mean with that. When you were
Mm-hmm.
when you were learning, and even like when you said you went to that dev shop and you just worked every day on
Mm-hmm.
on those skills, when you started, did you just start off like, hey, I'm learning iOS, and everything from day one, was it reading this, how to do this, and then trying to do it on a real app? Or did you go through like, making kind of following the tutorials and then decided to what you wanted to make? Or what was like your process from like learning to actually putting it in action and having something in the app store?
Honestly, it's like feature by feature.
Okay.
On an app, I'd be like, okay, well, I need to have a list. How do I do a list? Next thing, this thing. And it was on feature by feature I was learning.
Okay.
So I would come up with the feature first. Yeah. I wouldn't, I mean, if you're looking through tutorials, you're like, oh, this is what you can do. Cool. Like, I don't have to do the tutorial first.
Yes.
Right. I would present it. I would like draw it up or mock it up and show it to the guy that owns the dev shop. And then he was like, cool, do it.
And then you just make it, and
Mm-hmm.
you make it sound so simple. All right, Lauren Hill. It could all be so simple. All right. I mean, I'm truly amazed with like just your not only just your talent, but like your approach to it. I always feel like people who are doing great things, if you talk to them, there's a reason, and a lot of times the reason it normally is like the philosophy or the approach. And I found like the things that, people consider me uniquely great at, I just have an approach that is relatively simple to me, but that same feeling I have listening to you, because I've overthought, I'm a WordPress developer by day, it's my job, etc. But my heart is in iOS. Every idea I think about is iOS, but I've overthought it so much where it's like, man, where do I find the time? What are the right ideas? Should I, and just hearing your simplicity, it's like, it's inspiring, and it's also motivating, and it's also like, dude, man, like, just do it. And that's what it seems like you have, like a spirit of just like, hey, I'm going to do it. And it seems like you don't really make any room for anything besides that.
Which iOS are you taking an iOS class right now? Or you're already an iOS developer.
No, I'm taking a class right now.
From where?
It's a class on I don't know if it's pronounced Udemy or Udemy, but it's
whatever you want it to be.
Okay, Udemy.
Yeah.
And it's a teacher named Angela Wu. And the course it's a great course. It's like you make 20 apps during the course. I've made like the first 2.
20?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I'm on the second one right now, but I just haven't been, and I know from my past experiences that it's something that requires consistency, but I've been more like, I'm heroic one day, next day I'm not, and instead of just, getting those small day-to-day victories.
Have you done the Stanford iOS course?
No, I haven't.
It's free.
Okay.
It's free. It's on iTunes. That's how I learned.
Stanford iOS course on iTunes.
Yeah. They teach you all of the same thing. I mean, they're an institution. They teach the basics. So you have a basis to go off of. And from that, it was like, okay, well, now I understand everything about the language and how all of the moving parts work. Now let's just go to tutorials and be intentional about it. So I don't know anything about the course on Udemy that you're taking. So if that one's working good, then great. I'm just saying that I usually tell people the Stanford one.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I can't, you can't really judge if a program is good or bad without giving it the proper effort. So I can't really even say, it's not good because I haven't really given it good effort yet. But everything I've taken has been really informative. But I'm a fan of like seeing I am a fan of educational courses and I've heard the guy who created I forgot his name, but the guy who created Gumroad, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's an app where you can take any product you want and sell it on Facebook and pay what you want. It kind of came up around the same time of like Fiverr and all of those, but when I was reading about that guy, that's where he learned as well, was the Stanford iOS course. And I've heard a lot of other really good mobile developers reference that as well. So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to take this as some confirmation. Now, as you've went along on your your growth and evolution, it seems like you have a real spirit for sharing valuable information and helping other people.
Yes.
And what about where did that drive come from? Is that something that was just naturally in you, or?
I've always wanted to help. I've always been like empathetic to like more oppressed people, which was not as common where I grew up or in Chino Hills. So, what really got me into doing it? Because I did some stuff in college. I think it's hard for me to say where it came from, but now it's like part of my everyday life. I like to get a little bit like spiritual with you. In the past 2 years, I've been asking God what God wants of me rather than asking God to give me things. And so like reaching back and helping people has been what I think I was put here to do.
No, that is awesome. That's it's like spiritual maturity as well. With that. And and I mean, it seems like you're in receiving mode, as far as the acceptance of that purpose. So I mean, all of that together is pretty amazing. And is that what led you to the creation of Techstackd? Was that something that was okay?
So I did a lot of one-on-one mentorship for startups. I was still trying to figure out my footing. That's part of why I stopped working on Sutrology, is because I felt like it just wasn't what like I was supposed to be doing. And then I started maybe trying consulting. I didn't really like consulting, but I was still, helping people. I thought of helping other startups with like a lot of people would reach out to me to be like their technical co-founder, and then I would say no, but I'll be your technical advisor. I don't advise doing that because people like you could charge people for that. So I was doing that for free. And then this one guy from Chicago reached out to me and he asked me to help him with his stuff. And he wanted to create an app for people on food stamps. And I was his technical advisor. And then like fast forward, I was his technical advisor for a few months. And then there was an event here at my office in Google in LA where the Waze team was just doing an event. Lupe Fiasco was there too. And it was and there's not a lot of Black people here. And there was a lot of interns, and I had all the Black interns with me. So obviously, like if you've been in a room with a lot of like non-Black people, the Black people just like gravitate towards each other. So Lupe ends up talking to me and asking me for advice about creating apps and stuff. And then I bring up the guy that I was helping. And then Lupe's partner, who is a director of growth at Waze and also the founder of Waze in the U.S., she was the one who was like, oh, we're his advisors too. And it turns out we were all advisors to this one startup.
Wow.
And then they asked me to join their team, and I started helping them more. And because their team is called the Neighborhood Start Fund. And like I did a couple things with them. I was helping them with all of their startups, but most of them started with ideas and not already a team with a technical person. A few of them did, but most of them did not. And I started to see that the biggest issue with all of these like Black-owned startups were that they didn't have a technical person on their team, and that was what was leading to their downfalls. And each of the startups was invested in or I don't know if it was invested in, but they definitely got money from the Neighborhood Start Fund. And a lot of them lost a lot of that money spending it on devs that didn't execute what they wanted. So, and I was like, well, that could have been completely avoided if you had a technical person on your team. So that's where where I first started to come up with the course that I have for non-technical founders, but I'll get to that. But then I started I went to this other event with Diane and Lupe it's called Google for Entrepreneurs Demo Day. It's like a pretty big thing in the startup world. And I was in a room with all these investors, like the top of the investors. And they were all talking about these similar problems. They all had the same problems. And I was like, well, there's all these like people coming out of boot camps. Why don't you hire them? And then like one VC was like, well, boot camp grads are going to go to Facebook or Google. Why would they go to these startups? I don't think they basically said, no, I don't think that's right. So I was like, you're not even going to try? So I was like really like taken aback by that. I'm like, well, I'm going to try. Like, and you guys want to start these big programs. I'm going to start one by one. Why don't you try that? And so, because to them, money is the bottom line. And for me, like people is the bottom line for me. And so, sorry, this is a really long story, but I want to like get to the point. So I started talking to a lot of Black and brown people who were in boot camps that had just graduated and seeing like what their experiences were. Turns out most of them were leaving without jobs and were unemployed. So I was like, okay, well that answers one thesis, but like they still aren't skilled enough to be paired up with all of these startups. And the way that I built my skills is by actually getting into a company. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to help people one by one get into companies. That was the hardest thing that I did probably last year. It was, I got to see what it's like as a boot camp grad because like I came from a good school. So getting a job was pretty easy for me. And I was networking when I was in school. I had all these projects. Whereas these people did boot camps, they spent like, $10,000 that they already didn't have. They wanted to change their careers. And people were just not, their opinions on boot camps weren't the greatest. These people didn't have the same resources that I had when I was in school. So part of why, and so what I was doing one by one is I was providing all of the assistance. I was like going over their resume, redoing their resume with them. I was giving them mock interviews. I was helping them find jobs. I was like looking outside, like while I was at work and outside of work, I was looking for jobs for them to apply to. I was trying to use my name and my position as a Google engineer to say, hey, I'm vouching for this person so they can at least get a phone screen or they can at least get their resume looked at. Because at first they weren't even getting responses. There's one guy that sent over 250 applications. And no, he sent a lot more applications, but he got over 200 rejection emails.
You know, and one thing I always wondered about that, just with that model, because we have a couple of those out here, and they really aggressively market, you know, the whole thing of come here, learn how to code in 12 weeks. And actually, the one I was on today, they said on their website that we have grads at Google, Facebook, and a lot of people ask me about that because, you know, me just being a web developer, what I think about that. And for me, the verdict has been like, it sounded kind of strange to me to be able to say that a person in 12 weeks could be, you know, working at a Google, but at the same time, I don't know anyone who's been through one to be able to judge it. So while you were touching on that, do you think that boot camp model is working? Or, I mean, for 10 grand, like you just told me about a Stanford course I could take for free. And if I did my research, you know, and there's people like you who I could reach out to if I show that I've done step one that maybe could point me in the direction of step two, do you think that boot camp model is working or a sound investment for people?
So the answer is it depends, because even when I was in school, there were a lot of people who were just going to class, doing their work, and that's it. And then they were having issues getting hired because they didn't have extra projects. They weren't setting themselves apart. You know what I mean? So I think they ended up getting hired, but they weren't getting hired at like a Google. I just had this conversation last week, and because it's a question that I get a lot, and I think that part of the advantage of when I was in school, the fact that it was over 4 years, it got to sink in a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
I get taught the basics and then it sinks in, because the next year I do the more advanced version. And then the next year after that, I could do the more advanced version of that. So it starts to sink. It has time to sink in. So I understand the concepts, and it's not just do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But that goes through. However, there are hustlers everywhere. You know what I mean? A hustler can go to a boot camp and get hired because that's just what they did. And they probably would have also been ended up in a similar place if they went to a school, if they taught themselves. You know what I mean? There's one girl in Techstackd. She was the first girl I helped, so that's why I thought it was going to be easy. She was a hustler. She was going to events every week. She was having people look at her resume. She was seeking mentorship all the time. She was in a boot camp, but she was very strategic and making sure that she had a job. And she was doing the work. And so I was assisting with that, but I was helping someone who's already probably going to do well. I just helped her give that extra nudge. So I thought that it was going to be just as easy. Every other person that I've helped after that has been much more difficult, unfortunately. And it's not to say anything bad about them. It's just that that's who she was or is. That's how she still is. She's still going to meetups. She's an introvert too. Like,
wow.
But she knows what she wants. And yeah, but so I think it's unrealistic to say going to a 12-week boot camp means that you're going to come out as a software engineer. Because a lot of, unfortunately, because I don't think that a lot of the interview processes do evaluate your abilities, but the majority of them are going to ask you stuff about data structures, are going to ask you stuff about algorithms. I don't think that there's enough time to let that sink in for people or for them to even understand the concept. Where like, I couldn't even understand the concept in a quarter at school, which was 12 weeks or 13 13 weeks of finals. It took taking the beginner class and the advanced class of algorithms and data structures to really understand what I was doing.
Wow.
So, but there are places that won't ask you stuff like that. There are places that just want you to execute.
Okay.
But I did, from a CEO that will remain nameless, I did talk to a CEO of a prominent company that just raised a bunch of money, and they said that they hired some juniors and it's not working out because they can hire somebody on Upwork that can do the work better and faster and cheaper versus a junior.
Wow.
So
no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you articulated what my assumption, my hypothesis probably was.
Mm-hmm.
But just hearing that, I hope, for people listening and considering that, they kind of take that into consideration, because it just sounds like,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like a strange proposition to me. I don't know anybody
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody who set out on this journey. And I consider myself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a full-time developer. I consider myself entry level, and I don't know anybody even at this level who started out with the goal of 3 months from now walking into somewhere and being prepared to work. Everyone I knew just kind of started tinkering, had an idea, wanted to try something out, and took their time.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about, data structures and algorithms to have an advanced conversation with you about it. And I'm a developer. I'm a WordPress developer, so it doesn't come up as much as maybe a software engineer would. But these are some really advanced things that they're kind of promising, in a very quick amount of time. And I wanted to ask somebody who works at, the highest of levels like yourself to get an objective answer.
We hire boot camp grads, but and we hire people who didn't do anything and just had their own projects. You know what I mean? Or not they didn't do anything; they just didn't have a formal education. But again, those are the hustlers. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But a lot of people that are a lot of them are trying to transition their careers. There isn't like an interim in between. This other woman that I was talking to, she is I think the director of engineering at this company called Threadloom.
Okay.
She was it would be if we had enough money, we would start dev shops that could be an interim place where boot camp grads, we can hire them so they can get their legs and then they can go. Because going straight from boot camp to working, I've seen people do it. There are people that can do it, but I would really, really like to see what the numbers look like for the people who end up unemployed and how long they're unemployed for. And then also the diversity breakdown between that, because the majority of the people that I have helped thus far are Black and brown and spent a good amount of time unemployed.
No, that's real. That's real, and that is a fair, objective, intelligent answer. And I do think, with this skill set, and I'm coming from a self-taught background. My degree is in business. A quick side note: I actually interviewed with Google when I was graduating college, but this was before they had some of their new policies. The interview was going good. We were having a good conversation, and then they said, "Yeah, we really like you, man. What's your GPA?" And I said, "Huh?" And they said, "Yeah, what's your GPA?" I said, yeah, no, what's your GPA? So, but
that was me. That was me. That's why I didn't go to Google immediately. I got denied. I think I got denied from their internship because my GPA was too low.
Yeah,
I had a bad GPA. Bad for what they were looking for. You had to have over a 3.0. I think by the end of my sophomore junior year, I had worked my way up to a 2.9. And then when I graduated, I may have passed 3. Well, I'm not sure though, but I know my GPA was not the greatest. So, that's why I didn't go to Google.
No, most definitely.
I went to Microsoft first.
Oh, well, you had to settle for Microsoft, huh? It's a cold world.
Well, I went to Microsoft because I hustled my butt off to get the internship there. And when you get an internship, that's like it's much easier to get a full-time offer.
Okay. Are those internships available for? Do they have like a post grad type of internship or apprenticeship at these type of companies for like a boot camp grad, or even someone who has a couple projects, maybe isn't ready for a full time position, but do they still have those positions outside of college?
Thank you for asking. That's something that I have been working on. I've been trying to get Google to. Google has apprenticeships, but only in the UK right now. But I've been working with a company called Career Karma. I've been working with their CEO, Ruben Harris, to get a program at Google in the US like that. But Ruben and his team are going through Y Combinator right now. So we're on pause until he's done with Y Combinator. And I know that Microsoft has something, I think it's called Year Up or Leap. LinkedIn has, or maybe LinkedIn is called Leap. I don't know, but I know there's one specific, there's one at Microsoft, there's one at LinkedIn, there's one at Stack Overflow, there's one at MailChimp, I believe, and Twilio. So those are the most popular ones that I know right now. And I think people are becoming more open to it. Because it's really weird that it's like, oh yeah, these companies don't require a degree to be hired, but they do require a degree for literally every other program. So like a relevant degree.
No, that is
for you to be a student.
Yeah, no, that is a real issue. Now you think about it, because it's like, there a lot of times the gift of college, in my opinion, is the patient resources that you have available. The ability that like when you're in college, person doesn't mind you coming and being a part of their company for 6 months, and just teaching you stuff, and they have no expectation. But it seems like outside of college, everything is for high stakes. Like everything is all or nothing.
Yeah. That's one of those things that gets me like really upset, because we treat adults like we treat students like, oh, they're young, their whole future's ahead of them, whatever, which is great. And even for like high school students. And then for adults, we're just like, well, you made your bed, better go die now. Like, I feel like when people talk about like where you are in your career, if you want to make a career transition at 30, you have been working less than 10 years and you have over 30, 40 years left of work that you can do, of like working years. And you still call that as like, oh, you don't have an entry level for that. You don't have programs for that. You still have 30, 40 years left of working. You're nowhere near the middle of your career. And same for in your 40s, same for your 50s. You still have 15. If you're in your 50s, you still have 15 years left before retirement age.
No, you have a great point there.
It's plenty of time.
I think the only industry or the only career that really understands that and really welcomes you to make a pivot and will treat you the same whether you're 25, 35, 40 is law. You go to law school, you're a 2L student, you can intern anywhere. You could go intern at a clerk and be 37 years old. But but to your point, outside of that, and even that requires you to be in some type of postgraduate program. So even that's not truly this situation that I might be describing. But there is a real gap there because to your point, it is you made your bed. Once you're out of college, it's like you made your bed. You chose a major in business. Figure it out, and I would have loved to if there would have been a post college intern type program that I could have explored this interest. I would have loved to have done something like that. And I think that like you, very mildly like you. I'm you. You know, you're Louis the 13th. You know, I'm Hennessy. But in my own way, I was very self driven. You know,
Mhm.
and so I was able to
Yeah.
hack together my own learning to get some opportunity. But a lot of people
Yeah.
that maybe, I mean, not maybe, would be great assets to the culture. They just need a little
Mhm.
bit more structure.
Yeah.
And when you ask,
But so this is my thing. Like there's almost like this gatekeeping thing in tech because we have, how many programs there are for children and how, like, I love children. I've taught children. I used to teach kids only until I had this epiphany, and now I teach adults only. But there's so many resources, billions of dollars focused on just educating children when they're parent, and still when you're educating children, you're making a bet that they're going to choose it. You don't know they're going to choose it. And the reason why I think that we should shift some of that stuff towards adults, there are so many adults who already made the decision, I want to make this change. And most kids get influence for what they're going to do from their parents. So if we can actually uproot a whole family from one class to another by just providing those resources. And they exist. The amount of headcount exists, the amount of money exists, and we keep complaining that there's not enough coders and stuff for these companies. We're just gonna have to wait till the kids grow up. There are people who want to do it right now. Why don't you just train them? So sorry, I'm just ranting.
No, hey, it's a good rant. It's a good. Hey, it is a great rant. And no, I've look. You have dropped nothing but bars and resources. You know, I had you talked about how you were praying and really kind of just trying to find purpose and direction. I've been really going through the same thing. Where just really trying to find, how really trying to allow myself to be used. You know, be totally honest with you. I have major imposter syndrome. So I'd be like, man, why the hell are these people even listening to me? But for whatever reason, they are, and God keeps bringing people like yourself, into my circle. So I just really prayed for 2019, and this came to my heart. 2018, I tried to give the game. 2019, I want to give the resources. So what you've done today is like everything you said. I have a list of like links to put into these notes. So your answer, your answer. I mean, this isn't nothing but valuable jewels being dropped. I don't want to miss out on some things you just casually dropped that I just need to get some more details on. How does one have a permanent installation in the Smithsonian, like in randomly, casually just bring that up in conversation? Like, how did that happen?
So the director of the African American Smithsonian, a few years before it opened, he came to Google, to our Black Googlers network, and said, I want this Smithsonian to be the most advanced Smithsonian there is to date. So the most modern, this is going to be the best one. It's ours. You know what I mean? So he came to Google, and only one person came up to him and said, I want to do this for you. And it was my team lead, Travis McPhail. And he used every resource that he could to rally a $1 million donation to the Smithsonian, and then also to get a team together to do an exhibit for him. And so he just sent an email blast out, and I didn't actually receive it. If you know Anthony D. Mays, he did a BuzzFeed video from Compton to Google. So I ran into him, and I was like, hey, like that morning I was like, okay, now I'm ready. Like I had just recovered from like a series of tragedies, like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I want to use myself to do something better. And he was like, did you see that email? No. And then he sent it to me, and it was me and another Black Googler, and then one white Googler who was on the hardware team. It was just the four of us, and we created the installation on our free time, just voluntarily, and we worked on it for a few years until last February 1st, Black History Month. We revealed the installation, and it was all just voluntary.
Wow, that is pretty awesome. You
And now it's permanent.
Wow. Okay. And just on your free time, I know what I like about everything you said. You said it's like when you have a common, like, reoccurring theme of see an issue, decide to do something, and it's done. And there's not a lot of pondering.
I don't know. It wasn't that quick. Have you ever worked with the government before?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like it's done as far as the speed that it's done in, but I'm saying like the certainty of the decision and the process. Once the process is going, just a continuous process of, hey, I've made this decision, and I'm going to see this through. And I think a lot of times a lot of people, they put these extra steps in between. I've made the decision to do, and I'm going to see this through. And it seems like with you make the decision, and once you make the decision and you committed to it, then it's on and popping, and that's very admirable. One thing I wanted to make sure I got to as well is you said you have some courses where you've, and I want to make sure that we get an overview of this, and so any listeners can be sure to check this out as well. So where can your courses be found, and people can get more information on those?
So I have a course for non-technical startup founders where I teach them how to hire developers for their ideas, because a lot of the time people will just be like, all right, I want an app. And then they just let the developers make all the decisions, and then they end up not getting what they wanted, and then they lost like $20,000 of their money. So my course is to alleviate that and actually position yourself as a product expert and as a product manager and a project manager over the developer. So you can find more information about it. I'm probably not going to open it back up until May, but you can sign up for updates at techstackd.com. It's TECH, stacked, STACKD.com. No E. It's Techstackd with no E at the end. Okay,
techstackd.com.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll definitely post that in the show notes. And when you're working at a Google and you're around that level of talent, like when you first started there and you came in there and you obviously you're educated, have a background, built things. What's that experience been like? Is this something you had to kind of grow into, or you a little nervous at first?
Yeah.
Or
Oh man, my imposter syndrome is crazy. I was like a wounded animal coming into Google and just trying not to step on any toes, trying to keep up with everybody. And it's not until like very recently where I started to like actually get my legs and start having more leadership positions, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I would feel like every time when performance review season would come around, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get marks where I have to, I'm going to get marks where it's called like needs improvement, meaning like I'm going to get fired, which is what happened to me at Microsoft. So I felt like that was about to happen to me again. And then I just but I wanted to do it right this time. There's a bunch of other things going on when I was at Microsoft too. But anyway, I still deal with it now. I'm about to transition to a new team in March, so it's probably going to happen again. But I started to have more confidence when, like, just working with people. I'm like, oh, like they're smarter than me in these things, but I know more than them in these things, and I'm confident in that now. So it just took time. It definitely took time to grow into it.
That's pretty awesome. Like listening to you say that, and even you share a fellow imposter syndrome, haver, it's kind of surprising because, I just hear a bunch of wins when I hear you just tell your story. And I know that we all have challenges that we've had to get over. So like
Mhm.
What adversity have you had to really kind of face in, this journey that
Mhm.
you've been on?
Yeah. I guess the first thing that I would say is I was the only Black person where I went to school. That was really tough. Just dealing with people saying things, and I just kind of my mom taught me to just like brush things off and not really like ruffle feathers. But I kind of grew out of that. And then I was doing super well with like my app development and stuff like that up until 2013. At the end of 2013, I found out that my sister found out that she had cancer
Hmm.
in the day before Thanksgiving, and she was in the hospital every single day up until when she passed away. So she was 19, I was 21, and that was also the time where you're supposed to be interviewing and so that's the time you're supposed to be interviewing and going to different jobs or looking for different jobs and choosing your career path. And I canceled everything, and I was I had to I started doing that in all my classes because she just got the cancer is very aggressive. She passed away 3 months later after she was diagnosed.
Wow.
And after that, it was just, I don't know, bouncing back was really hard. And then right after she passed away, I got into a relationship with a guy that was just not good for me at all. And that was my first year while I was at Microsoft. Yeah, my first year at Microsoft was really rough. I was a PM. I thought I was supposed to do well. Like I was supposed to be doing well. Like everyone had looked up and said like, wow, Bria, you did these great things. You're getting paid well out of college, blah, blah, blah. They thought like, oh, you have this great relationship. But then I was going home and just being like verbally abused and mentally abused. And then it started to turn into physical abuse. And that just started to weigh on my job performance. And it was rough. It was definitely really rough. I went through about 2 years. Yeah, a little over 2 years of just like bad times. Like no apps are being made, no progress is being made at work. There was nothing. There's no companies that I was working on, no side hustles. Like, yeah.
Wow. And do you think because of your because of your success and because I'm assuming you were
Mm-hmm.
the one who was always making stuff doing this, that maybe when you were going through your challenges, because people just assume you have it together, and almost like it's even
Yeah.
harder sometimes when people like
Mm-hmm.
yourself go through things because on
Yeah.
you're at Microsoft, you seem to be
Mm-hmm.
doing well. Did that make it even harder for you, or?
Yeah, I think in terms of friendships, that's what made it really hard. I think people assumed that. And then I did start to, not talk to my family as much. It was a hard time, like we lost, after her name was Nia. After we lost her, like it was just a weird dynamic in the house. So, or just in the family. And I'm the type where I like to retreat and go on my own. My family is more of the type where they want to be together. And I was also moving to Seattle. So it was definitely a lot. But I felt like that was I feel like that was what came into play for why I do what I do now, and asking God what I should be doing, because all the people I was surrounded by in college were all about do this for money, do this for money. So I'm being completely honest. I was doing computer science, making apps and all that stuff because I wanted to make money. It was all about money for me. And then it was after that and going through all of that where I'm just like, there's no amount of money in the world that can save your family,
That's real. That's real.
So
And another thing,
that's what made me learn. Yeah.
like
Sorry, go ahead.
now another thing that you bring up too that I think is very important, and like maybe kind of one of the elephants in the room in this tech space is mental health. and mental well-being. A friend of mine posted that he was he had considered suicide last year, and I was like, what? Like, I was surprised to read him even post that. And it hurt. It hurt, like it hurt my heart to hear that. Like, man, you were but on the outside looking in, it's like, man, you're a winner.
Yeah.
Like what would, like you're an amazing person. So I know that, and I know we have this facade sometimes, and I hate to call it that, but it's like, people just assume that,
really
especially us in Black tech, we're like heroes to people, and so people don't assume that we're hurting or we're struggling. And I do think we have to find a way, to have an outlet to be able to share that part of it with each other. Because I would, like, if you told me, granted, it's my first time speaking with you, but I would never think that you were going through some of the things that you just shared, just from a person who's winning and getting doing the things you were doing. So, I just,
So actually, when I started Google, because I went straight from Microsoft to Google within a month, because I was still with the person I was trying to not be. I actually attempted suicide in like 2 months into my job. And that was like the turning point for me. And I ended up, because he's Black, and it was like also the height of Black Lives Matter, and he would always use the excuse like, oh, you're going to call the police on a Black man, just like all these white people, stuff like that, where I was like, but like, you're going to kill me. Like, you keep telling me you're going to kill me. So there's no one I can go to. So that's what kind of led to where I was. And like, people thought everything was great because I had just started my job at Google, went from Microsoft to Google. I was living in LA. My office is in Venice Beach. I just recently, like in the past year, started talking about it. So, like, I don't think people were expecting that. My parents definitely weren't. But I did overcome it because I went to therapy. And I'm very, very, very thankful that Google offers therapy for free when you have, like, when you're going through stuff. Or not for free, but, somebody's paying for it.
Yeah, no, but the resources available, and that's no, that's real, and and I think I haven't ever went to like professional therapy, but I've seen what, like, my friends who have went. I've seen some really big changes in people's lives from going to that. So no, that
it like just completely, I don't know, it turned everything around for me to get to the point of putting myself out there again and actually getting back into making products again. That's like my first thing was the rebrand to Sutrology and actually standing up for myself, because I never ever used to stand up for myself. Like, people would call me stuff all the time. My mom taught me to not do that. But like, I started to learn to actually like really, really stand up for myself. So I'm thankful for that too.
No, definitely. And no, and I'm thankful for your vulnerability and your ability, to share your story and also share the whole story.
So, and the reason why I try to tell the story a lot more now is because it's actually really common for in women and just people who are in abusive relationships. I think that the statistic is up to 60% of people who are in abusive relationships end up losing their jobs because of like reasons stemming from it. And like, it's one of the leading causes of death for Black women my age.
Wow.
Being killed by my partner.
Wow.
I think it's number 2.
Wow. That is that's wow.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I try to make the stats a little bit more known out there, because more American women have been killed by their partners than all Americans killed in both Iraq and Afghanistan combined since 9/11.
Jeez. Jesus.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, wow. I didn't even, I don't know. For me, it's one of those things where when a problem doesn't affect your world, sometimes you forget it
Yeah.
exists,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I'm probably
No,
around
it's
women that
it's
are
pretty
in
common.
abusive relationships every
Mhm.
day and just never even, have my radar up. But now that,
Yeah.
wow.
And I just wanted to call a little bit of attention to that because, like when we talk about, working, we're always talking about work, but you can't, separate your personal life or the personal struggles the same way, like just as a Black person, like when something is going on in like our community, it's hard to come to work. One of the things that solidified me staying at Google was when I think it was when Philando Castile died. The whole company, everyone sent out, like VP sent out emails saying to comfort your Black coworkers like the next morning, and that we could take a day off for mental health and stuff like that.
Oh, that's solid.
But yeah, and it's just like we can't separate the person we are at home from the person that we are here and the things that are affecting us. So when I talk about work, I also like to talk about the things outside of work that affect us.
No, hey, I really appreciate that, and I think I'm gonna try to hold myself to and incorporate that into how I describe things, because I think sometimes we wear the shield so much, that people get unrealistic. Not that it does two things. One, it shows people a glimpse of the other side, but also it kind of comforts people who are going through similar things to see that humanity, in someone who, that they see in a highlight or feel like is doing amazing things. And that's
Yeah.
that I'm telling you, Black Tech.
There's no, it's not the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? Like I thought that was the end. Like before, I thought that was the end, and then like I was able to, almost be rebirthed, and like, yeah, and there are a lot of people who go through that. I do want people to know that you can still do the amazing things you thought you were going to do a long time ago.
Black Tech is full of heroes. I mean, I just, like I said, Black Tech is full of heroes.
Oh, thank you.
No, hey, I really appreciate your time. I really, I mean, this has been a blessing. I wanna also thank the people who reached out to me and told me that, hey, you should have more sisters and more women's story on your podcast. Because I was challenged, by listeners, and embracing that, I aggressively went to, and I then slipped into a blessing, and really, I look forward to, continuing to build with you and, establishing a mutually beneficial relationship. If there's anything I could do in the Houston market with Techstackd or ways I could, be an asset to whatever it is you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
so, I just wanted to touch on, because I know the story, I know my story was really long, the inspiration story for Techstackd, but Techstackd now is a membership for people who want to launch careers in tech, who are probably already in a boot camp, and then I offer, or people who are already in their careers who want to move to the next level. So if you know anybody that wants to do workshops, I have a workshop next week for coding interviews. So like step-by-step, how to get through a coding interview. And I have another one at the end of the month for how to secure speaking engagements at conferences.
Okay. And are those accessible just via online if I'm a member, webinars?
It's all video. Yeah, it's all virtual, and it'll just be online, and it's available either to members or for $10 per workshop if you're not a member.
Okay. Hey, you can count me in for sure for that the speaking one.
I know,
like, hey,
right?
I could get a couple dollars. I'm over here telling you, I did kind of self-code my way up there, let me throw me a couple dollars, Flatiron. Let me come talk to these bootleggers. Not bootleggers, boot campers. I'm so sorry, boot campers. So, hey, but no, I really, look, I acknowledge you. I honor you. I value you. I appreciate you, and I thank you. I want to leave the floor to you. Man, any closing words you have is
Mhm.
yours, and look forward to hearing about more amazing things from you.
Thank you. Well, I just want to let people know that I am still just starting out. And like, if anybody has advice for starting communities or things that they want to see out of the community, I'm all ears. I'm trying to help people get to the level that they're trying to get to with their tech careers. So I'm just winging it right now, but I would love feedback.